And this is how Asase, Mother Earth, King of Asante, Ghana and abroad, you who have enjoyed grace and goodwill, 25 years on the throne, with peace, sustainable leadership, sustainable development, and leadership as your legacy. To you, I say good morning. To you, the Princess Consort of Asante, Lady Julia Osei-Tutu, our special guest, President of the Republic of Seychelles, Your Excellency Wavel Ramkalawan, in the company of the First Lady, Your Excellency Linda Ramkalawan, the second President of our Fourth Republic, Your Excellency John Ajekum Kufuor, the Juabehine Nana Otuo-Sribo II, our Regional Minister, the Honorable Simon Osei-Mensah, Your Excellency Harriet Thompson, High Commissioner of the UK to Ghana, other esteemed members of the Diplomatic Corps, Nananom and our esteemed chiefs and queens from Asante and beyond, our distinguished speakers, religious leaders, the Vice Chancellor, faculty and staff of the Kwame Nkrumah University and other distinguished members of academia, captains of industry, heads, teachers, students and pupils of selected schools, members of the press, the good and the great of Asante joining us here and on radio, television and online. Ours is a warm and hearty welcome to this day in history where we mark 100 years of the return of our King, Nana Ajiman Prempeh I, from exile in Seychelles. It is our prayer that today gives us an opportunity to reflect, appreciate, and celebrate this pivotal moment in the history of Asante and Ghana and the broader struggle it played against colonial rule in Africa. My joy is made complete this morning by the presence of many sons and daughters of Asante who have come to add their weight to this celebration. To you all, we extend our warm and hearty welcome, Yemamo Akwaba. In welcoming us warmly is a great son of Asante a man who has served and continues to serve with distinction as the Manhene of Juabing. 53 years of distinguished service to Asante and Ghana as the chair of the Council of State. We're delighted to have him also as the chair of the 25th anniversary celebrations of Opemsuo Osei-Tutu II's reign. I give to you Nana Otuo-Sribo II.
Your Royal Majesty Opemsuo Osei-Tutu II, Asante, Lady Julia, Your Excellency Wavel John Ramkalawan, President of the Republic of Seychelles, Mrs. Linda Ramkalawan, First Lady of the Republic of Seychelles, our beloved President John Ajekum Kufuor, Second President of the Republic of the Fourth Republic, Regional Minister, Excellencies, eminent clergy, Madam Vice Chancellor and Provost of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Nananum, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Opemsuo Osei-Tutu II Silver Jubilee Planning Committee, I welcome you all to this morning's ceremony, which is the last of the three major activities the Planning Committee adored at the beginning of the year to celebrate three seminal events in the annals of our history, namely the 150 years anniversary of the Sovereignty War, which we marked in February, the Silver Jubilee of the coronation of Opemsuo Osei-Tutu II as Asante, which we celebrated with pomp and circumstance in April and May. With great honor, we welcome Your Excellency Webo John Ramkalawan, President of the Republic of Seychelles, and Mrs. Ramkalawan to Kumasi, the heartland of the Asante Kingdom. On this most historic occasion, marking the centenary of the repatriation of King Prempeh I from your nation, the Republic of Seychelles. We recognize with immense gratitude how the people of Seychelles, guided by their values of peace and hospitality, stood as compassionate hosts to our king during his stay in that country. It is truly fitting that today, as we mark this centenary, we are honored by the presence of Your Excellency, a person whose own life is dedicated to serving both country and the spiritual community as an Anglican priest. Hence, Excellency, your favorite appellation, Father President, because you straddle both the secular and non-secular worlds. Father President, we welcome you. We welcome our beloved President John Adjekum Kufuor. You have come to your own. And be assured, Mr. President, that we who know you respect you and honor you. And we shall so respect you until time and circumstance shall be no more. Today, we have gathered here on the sacred grounds of Menchia to commemorate one of the most significant events in the history of our people, the return of Opemsuo Prempeh I from exile a century ago. It is a moment of reflection, a moment of celebration, and a moment of deep reverence for the resilience, courage, and leadership of our great king and the unwavering strength of the Asante people. 100 years ago, our beloved king, the Asante Opemsuo Prempeh I, returned home from an island in the Indian Ocean called Seychelles. This exile, imposed by the British colonial administration, sought to diminish the influence of the Asante Kingdom, believing that by removing our king, they could break our unity. But alas, as history has shown, they were indeed wrong. Instead, our unity deepened. Our culture remained steadfast, and the spirit of the Ashanti people became unshakable. In 1896, Opemsuo Prempeh I, along with key members of the Ashanti royal family and his closest advisors, was taken into exile. For nearly 30 years, he remained far from his homeland, yet his leadership never wavered. He never surrendered his love for the Ashanti people, and his return in 1924 marked the rekindling of hope, pride, and resilience for all Ashantis. We remember his return not only as a return of our king, but as the return of the embodiment of our identity and sovereignty. For us, it was a powerful reminder that no matter how far away our leaders may be, no matter how far away, no matter how oppressive the conditions we face, the Ashanti spirit cannot be exiled. It cannot be silenced. Indeed, it is eternal. The exile of Prempeh I was not only a test of his personal strength and endurance, but it was a test of our people, And what did we do? We persevered. We maintained our cultural heritage, our customs, and our traditions, all in defiance of colonial attempts to dismantle them, even as our king was taken from us. The Asante people stood tall, united in purpose, determined to preserve our legacy for the future generations. The lessons of this history are clear. Just as Opemsuo, Prempeh I, refused to be broken, so too must we continue to refuse anything that threatens our unity, our sovereignty, and our dignity. His return signifies that no force can destroy the bonds that tie us together as a people. It is a lesson in the power of resilience, of courage, and the belief in the restoration of justice. As we mark 100 years since his return, we must honor not only the memory of Opemsuo Prempeh I, but also the enduring legacy he left behind. He taught us that leadership is not determined by mere power, but by the ability to serve one's people with dignity, wisdom, and unwavering commitment. And these are the very attributes that fortunately define the reign of our present king, Opemsuo II. His life in exile demonstrated his deep love for the Asante kingdom, and his return symbolizes our collective determination to hold fast to our traditions and our destiny, and our identity. Today, as we celebrate this milestone, let us look to the future with the same strength and vision that guided our ancestors. We owe it to them and to the generations to come to preserve our heritage, to continue building a strong and united Asante kingdom, and to ensure that the values of courage, unity, and respect of our tradition, as well as the traditions and customs of other ethnic groups, are never lost. In conclusion, I wish to thank you all for being part of this commemoration. Together, let us continue to honor our ancestors, preserve the legacy of Opemsuo Prempeh I, and ensure that the values of courage, resilience, courage, and unity are passed on to future generations. May the spirit of Opemsuo Prempeh I continue to guide us, and may the Asante Kingdom always remain a beacon of strength and pride. I thank you very much for your attention.
And for his organizational brilliance and his expertise that has shown through all the celebrations of our king, I ask that we celebrate the chairperson of the 25th Anniversary Planning Committee, Nana Otuo. Is that all you can do? Nana Yadawase. And so Nana Otuo has laid a foundation for us to establish an understanding of today's agenda. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for the next few minutes, please lend your attention to the screen as we behold a documentary, The Return of a King to Seychelles. Enjoy.
"120 years ago, the British colonial authorities finally invaded Kumasi, the capital of the epic 19th century empire and arrested the 26-year-old king of Asante, Kwekudua III, also called Nana Ajiman Prempeh I, the Queen Mother, Nana Yecha, and 50 others. They were sent first to Elmina in the coastal area of what was then the Gold Coast as political prisoners, and then to Freetown, Sierra Leone, before crossing the Indian Ocean to the Seychelles island aboard the SS Dakwa. This was in 1896, and at a time Asante had sent a mission to London to negotiate the terms of British incorporation of it into its colonial enclave. The mission was in London, where Joseph Chamberlain, the Secretary of State for the colonies, ordered the invasion. The arrest, which was meant to destabilize the empire, and its leadership led to the last of 8 Anglo-Asante wars of 1900, led on the Asante side by a woman, Yasantwa, Queen Mother of Edriso, later exiled to join Prempeh and the others in Seychelles. It set the tone for the decline of one of Africa's well-built empires since the 1700s. Some of the exiles, including Nana Yecha and Yasantwa, died on the islands, but others survived, including Prempeh I, whose 27-year captivity is equivalent to Nelson Mandela's Robben Island experience. He was eventually allowed by the British to return to Kumasi, dying 10 years after. 120 years after, there is a successor king, also called Kwekudua, with the stool name of Asante II. He inherits, as Prempeh's great-grandnephew, an unbroken but diminished Asante kingdom. The historic visit he makes to the tropical islands nation, associated with paradise and described by the political scientist Salabert as prison without bars, was under different circumstances. No military escort of the imperial imprimatur, but in glory from an independent Ghana, guest of honor of the President of the Republic of Seychelles. Ivor Ajimandria, an analyst of Seychelles Asante relations from the 1800s, traveled on the return of a king to Seychelles to continue his television interpretation of this most dramatic but also sorrowful episode in 19th century Asante's history, one of exile and dispossession into the unknown. History's shadows were on these coastal waters of Mahé. The first cosmopolitan king of Asante, Prempeh I, had made the 3 weeks journey by the sea route 120 years ago, aboard the SS Dakwa. His great-grandnephew, in a solemn, historic but long-awaited memorial visit, arrives by plane on April 22nd from South Africa to the Mahé International Airport as the sun sets on these blue waters. Otumfuo Osei Tutu II was received as king and accorded the courtesy of a head of state, and also as special guest of honor at the French-influenced colonial architecture, the State House in Mahé, by President James Michel. It was here they engaged in conversations of historical renewal.
Waiting for a long time. As the message came to Kumasi that I have to come to Seychelles. Sure. My great-uncle having settled on the ground. Sure. No port office.
The first is an honor to present to you. The stool is a symbol of the authority of the king. And to your Creole Dutch,
Welcome to the Seychelles, greetings everywhere.
Your Majesty, please allow me to present to you the symbol of Seychelles.
Nana Otiosrebo summed up the follow-up implication of the visit and strategies of fulfillment.
On behalf of the King, to say thank you for this warm reception this morning. The ambience is historical in itself. You know, this stately mansion make us feel very much, or have made us feel very much at home. First time when the King came here, it was rather under inauspicious circumstances. But now we are coming with full honor, glory, and grandeur.
The meeting with descendants of King Prempeh as evidence of this living story was a bundle of emotions. Mary Marimba Prempeh and her 3 sons and a daughter are the only remaining direct descendants of Prempeh, though they are descendants of the other exiles. Mary's mother, Susie, was a direct daughter of James Prempeh, son of the Asante Hene. Known and treated in high regard, including by the media in Mahé, these descendants have given ambassadorial services to Ghanaians who have passed through the shores of the island. Besides, bearing of ancestral resemblances, the post-death spirit of Prempeh is infectious in numerology of incidents.
Sweet paradise in my eyes.
Susie shares the same birthday with the King Prempeh, December 18. Terry, born on September 11th, was the same day the king arrived in Seychelles. And Andrew, born on November 11th, was when King Prempeh departed the island back to Kumasi.
I feel very proud to be with you today, and very sentimental too. Yes, very touching. Yes, to be with you here.
My brothers and I, as well as mom, it's very honored to be here with you all, and it is such an honor to meet you all as well. We've heard a lot about Ghana and about the Asante family, and now we are honored to have you here. Thank you.
When we sit in Kumasi, we still feel an attachment because we know you are here. And for 115 years since the old man was brought here, we haven't forgotten that Seychelles is also one of our homes that we will have to visit. And finally, we are here to meet you. I sent Ibos to come to explore. He gave me the report about meeting you and the courtesies we extended to him when he was here. That affirmed the blood relations. The fact that you drove to the hotel to say, I'm not going to let you stay in the hotel, come home and live in it. It is not gratitude, but it's a matter of your duty to have done that, bringing the family together again. His grandfather also was exiled to Seychelles, and he also died here. So it's all much about the same family. But we have come here at the invitation of your government. And for the next 3 days, we shall be sharing this visit with you. You are now part of our delegation. We've come to take you from Seychelles to join us to enjoy the visit. And we hope that one day we shall bring you to Kumasi to Ghana also to see. I'll let Ibo work on that so that we can bring you down to have a look and then learn more about where you came from. Secondly, it's a great family, it's a great kingdom, it's a great nation, Ghana. And so you must be missing out, as we are also missing out here because we are also here. So we will bring that together. You have cousins and uncles who are still there. that we deem it necessary, that we don't want to lose the roots here. Whilst we don't want you also to lose the roots back. So we do everything possible to bring us together again. We certainly wouldn't abandon you, we certainly wouldn't leave you here. We always will keep on reminding you that your roots are in Ghana. That you rest assured that you still have a family, you still have a king back home, thinking about you, knowing that you're here. So we thank you for coming.
The magic of your Creole coach, soft as the sunrise. In my eyes, I need to feel the freedom of the moon, showing me the keys to your Creole touch.
It is here, at the cemetery in Seychelles, that some of the political exiles who accompanied Nana Adjumani Prempeh were buried. Mary Prempeh's mother, Susie, and Susie's sister, Huguette, who died in the mid-2000s, were buried far off from here. The cemetery has as well the tombs of several gallant soldiers who fought on the side of the British and the Allied forces during the Second World War on the East African frontier. The current Queen Mother of Exile, Nana Asante, assisted by the Minister of Tourism, Culture and the Creative Arts, Elizabeth Ofusu Ajare, laid a wreath on behalf of Asante and Ghanaian women and their champion Oheniba Edusei Poku on behalf of Asante Man.
His memory and all the faithful party, those for their rest in peace.
Bienvenue aux Seychelles, vive le soleil.
And I'd like to be the one who asks and welcomes His Majesty the King from Ghana to please say a few words to Seychelles. Your Majesty.
Otokoine kase krobia ine kasangen. Otokoine kase krobia ine kasangen. Me ma krobia iri fiamani kotokungen. Me ma krobia iri fiamani kotokungen. Ose chuliche mi bodi wi visio. Ai ne benya sakiso supeni ni e kwabakuma sika po bani wo. O grasa tinaje kasangen.
For years to come, Seychellois will live with the memories of Carnival Victoria and the vignettes of his highlights, the king's big umbrella, his headgear or crown, the smoothing voices of the royal poets or kwadwumfoɔ amidst the ivory trumpet antiphonies, as well as the punctuation of his speech with linguistic affirmative approval.
So, Your Excellency, President James Michel, Excellencies, Your Royal Highness, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, 15 years ago, it became my dawn privilege to ascend the golden stool as the 16th king of the Asante Kingdom. Your great country, Seychelles, has been gracious enough to invite me and my delegation to make a symbolic return to the island. And we have chosen what we think is the right moment for this memorable voyage into history. We have chosen, not as some would have wished, to come and mourn and unburden ourselves of the pain and anguish of the past. We have chosen instead to join you in celebrating the joy of freedom. Sure.
And I'm happy to bring with me the direct granddaughter of our legendary warrior, Queen Mother, who apparently bears the name of Nana Asante II.
Sure.
For it was the courage to dare to be free of foreign domination that brought us into captivity.
Sure.
And your island was chosen for a refuge because, like the Gold Coast, you too were a colonial outpost.
Sure.
Today, we are liberated within a strong, sovereign, united Ghana, and you too are liberated. So we join together in freedom to celebrate the creativity of our people expressed in song and dance, in poetry, and in the fine arts.
Sure.
We salute the government of the Republic of Seychelles under your wise precedent on the organization of this carnival, and particularly for the effort to make it a focal point to international cooperation and the expression of authentic African culture.
Sure.
The more opportunities we create for the peoples of Africa to share and exhibit their inherent talents, the greater the prospects for achieving genuine unity and removing the sources of discord. When hearts are joined together to sing and dance together, there can be no room for xenophobia.
Sure.
Our destiny lies not in cutting each other adrift, but in joining our minds together to think, search, to innovate, and to create.
Sure.
We have come to join you today to send this message to this troubled world that it is possible to rise above the pain and anarchy of history, to let go of the past and focus on the things that are beneficial to the well-being of our generation.
The carnival, facing President Michel and former President James Mancham, drew its symbolic interpretation. Asante history and Prempeh's exile in Seychelles is part of the school curriculum. And a newspaper article by President Mancham asking for a serious public and government debate about the guest's speech generated the desired discussion. The Otumfo, in an unusual practice, granted an interview to the Seychelles Broadcasting Corporation for the Top Flight program, 20 Minutes, which drew one of its biggest evening audiences as he discussed Seychelles-Asante relations, but also international affairs.
Some managers and people out there, and the young players themselves, see it as economic development, so they want big money. So obviously when foreign teams contact them, they sign agreements and leave. So a player that you think could have helped your team to develop, within a year or two, he's left you. And you still have to start again by looking for a new one. That is the only thing affecting my team. But we shall come back to that. And then we'll come to Seychelles. If we have a team here, I can bet that we'll beat them.
That will be a very interesting match.
Yes.
Your Majesty, coming back to Seychelles, will you have the opportunity to visit some parts of the country outside the Carnival before you go back?
I would love to do that. It's a beautiful island. Driving through within these few days, I realized that it's a beautiful island, and I would love to explore that further. Or maybe come back privately next time, and then be able to explore the whole island later.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty.
Thank you
for
very
answering
much.
our questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If the descendants are living products of the exile story, the plantation house here at Le Rocher, a district within Mahé where Prempeh lived and still standing, is a resilient symbol of the narrative. Rented from a French family, the Adams, by the British, it was within this enclave that the Asante village, homes of the other political exiles, were until Prempeh moved into the property. Nearby and far off from here, the British had kept other anti-colonial leaders from the empire, including those from Palestine. Afif Didi of the Maldives, Archbishop Macarius from Cyprus, who became leader of independent Cyprus, the Kabaka Mwanga of Uganda, and the Sultan of Derak, Malaysia, Abdullah Jafar Moratham, in the roll call of resistance leaders. With the exception of this property as a historical heritage, all the others are gone to regeneration enterprises or redevelopment by private owners. But for minor renovation, this property is as Prempeh lived in. It was in this house that he was taught to read and write in English, and at a relatively short time to the surprise of his instructors. It is here that most of the over 1,000 correspondences he exchanged with the British colonial officers were written, and most probably where he wrote with the guidance of his mother, Nana Yi-chan, in 1907, the first Asante interpretation of empire history, the history of Asante kings and the whole country itself. But by traveling with 52 other chiefs and queens symbolic of the exile, Otumfuo Osei Tutu II did not only seek to reenact history, but to situate his thinking of the present into the past. It was at the same spot that Nana Ajiman Prempeh was photographed with the exile group. His great-nephew will record his presence with his entourage the same way, the changing face of history at the place of their desolation. He leaves with mixed feelings but congratulates the Adams family for keeping the heritage of his uncle and of Asante man's interest in his present and future preservation.
Be able to visit at this time to see where he lived for about 27 years. And especially you being the real owners of the house and still continue to be the owners and maintenance. It means we also have maintenance as the old man was there.
You always hold your mind, so please try and keep this. Your mom until she died, which I did. I looked after her for 27 years. And secondly, she said, take care of this house. We'll try.
Those with nothing to lose, life is just an easy cruise in paradise. Forget the wheels, forget the bills, let's climb the hills, free from all deals. Life is just an easy cruise in the Seychelles Isles. Always dreamt to take you there, leave all the hurt you bear. It's written, hidden in somewhere where you and I.
Of all Prempeh's experiences on the island, the most enduring and of rippling effect was the contestation of faith, his and Asante's, in God. It was not in doubt as far as they were concerned. The British, when Queen Victoria was Empress of much of the world, had converted and given him the Christian name of Edward. At the St. Agnes's Anglican Church, where he was baptized, though it would be in this church, St. Paul's Anglican Cathedral, he worshipped most of the time.
I would like to welcome you at St. Paul's Cathedral. Today is the fourth Sunday of Easter. It's a service of thanksgiving, of memorial for King Prempeh of Asante. It is good to welcome you in this place. We also give thanks for the King's 16th anniversary of his enthronement.
My dear brothers and sisters in Christ, today from the Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to John, we have the words of Jesus explaining his role to the Pharisees. In the beginning of this chapter of the Gospel according to John, he answers the Pharisees as we question him as to who he is, and he answers them, I am the good shepherd. That's who Jesus really is. For Jesus, the good shepherd, knows his sheep, and he knows all the details of our lives. You and I have nothing to hide from the good shepherd.
Prempeh permitted one of his sons, John, to be ordained as an Anglican priest in the bigger island of Mauritius. It was a pacifist act to the British and commitment of faith. Paul Boateng, born during the exile with his brother Thomas, later explained that, I do not think the elders sat down and rationalized whether they would convert or not. They found themselves in an alien context. Here, in Seychelles, the people drew comfort and strength from God, whom they worshipped in a different way. It was the same God as far as the elders were concerned. It was later that they had to decide on a Christian denomination.
Perhaps Nelson Mandela modeled his life after King Prempeh. By this visit, Opemsuo II has asked me that to inform you that the memory of his grandmother and his achievements will always encourage him to pursue assiduously the legacy bequeathed by the great King Prempeh. Once again, I would like to thank you, Bishop, priests and the congregation for the benefit of this service, and wishes to inform you that even though it will be far away from you in Ghana, it is always for you who spread at this church.
But much has not changed in Asante's belief that God should be worshipped in a cultural context. The Asante royalty is mainly Anglican, thanks to Prempeh's baptism. But the ivory trumpet poets and verbal artists still use their media to glorify God in the most cultural form of hybridism and through the sacrament of the Eucharist. The Asante Hene is today the titular head of the church in Asante, the Metropolitan Archbishop of the province of West Africa, and the primate is the Bishop of the Kumasi Diocese and a subject of the King. the Most Reverend Dr. Daniel Yinka-Safo, as well as descendants of Prempeh who have been chancellors and peoples and priests wardens over the decades. The impact is geo-neutral, and the singing of Handel's Zadok the Priest or God Save the Queen could be with the same flourish whether the Archbishop of Canterbury is officiating at the Westminster Abbey or St. Cyprian the Martyr in Kumasi. A century and 2 decades of a young king's exile is remembered with deep meaning. Hawkish historians tend to treat Prempeh's reign with peripheral analysis and overlook his reasoning power at the time. When resistance to an arch-imperial intention of destruction did not always lead to resolution at the crossroad of history. They turn to forget also that throughout the period he was the testament of cultural faith and its defense through history writing and the elegy of letters. The personally taught history of his people to the new generation born on the island and celebration of Asante festivals. That he also became a sorrowful figure of cultural bereavement, having to bury his parents and other elderly chiefs in a foreign land without due honors as leader of the exiled group. He has written in one of his letters that of the 54 people I came with, there remain only 6 chiefs, and out of the 6, 1 is blind. The remaining are old and ill. This has created more loneliness as compared to when we were so crowded. These letters of melancholy created nationalistic protests from the intelligentsia in the Gold Coast, including from Nana Oforiatta I, E.J.P. Brown, Dr. B.N. Quote, Papafio, the lawyer J.E. Casely Hayford, who said, Prempeh should be allowed to die in his own land. Yet he still had the sanity of preservation, even at a point when he had reached the limits of his powers. If he had not been strong at the time, Asante would have been weaker today. He would not also have been able to sponsor as progenitor the transition of Asante into the 20th century's modernity. Today's relationship with former adversaries is friendship, diplomacy, and cultural cooperation.
Thank you very much. Well, we were there not so very long ago. Yes.
Unfortunately, I didn't.
And we didn't have time to travel outside of Prague.
I was in UK for 2 days.
It could even be a drawback to Imperial Anthem. Queen Victoria would have been happy with this. But the leaders of old also believed in fate and the destination of its course, whether through layers in the deep forest, across streams or oceans. The path crosses the stream, they said. The stream crosses the path. Which is the elder? They once asked as a puzzle of sometimes life's dilemma. For they knew, if only for rhetoric, that the path was of long ago. The Levin also says in Asante of the death forbears, Yedru amanfuswa ne akai yano. That the ancient of places remind us of the gallantry of the nation's builders. And so it is that a nephew remembers a great uncle.
And hardly do the stars ever align to tell a beautiful story as ours, one of resilience, courage, and an indomitable will to persist. 25 years upon his ascension to the throne, in the 150th year after the Sagrenti War, and 100 years upon the return of our King. Please help me appreciate our King, Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II, Asante Hene, King of Asante, home and abroad. Thank you. And now, Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, having been prepared in mind and in heart, let us receive the man who built the bridge from Asante to Seychelles. Director at the Menchia Palace Museum and Associate Director at the Wole Soyinka Foundation, I give to you a son of Asante man, Professor Ivan Ajiman Duya.
The eminent linguist of Asante Court, Bafo Osayakoto, recounted in a 1998 conversation how Asante man received Nana Ajimai Prempeh I and his returning Exile party at the Kumasi railway station. Bafo Akoto was a teenager at the time, and his father had preempted a scenario of a reception and an unfolding sense of history that will be remembered. It was more than that, though, indeed an epiphany in reconciliation. And that was how father and son ended up with a mail-in crowd on November 12, 1924. The youth of Bafo Akoto's time knew of the tragic circumstances of Prempeh's exile, the 27-year alienation that Nelson Mandela would eventually share with him in African history. In 1897, Prempeh was aware of the imminent danger, or worse, end of his reign. The deportation orders that had been made by the British military were followed by the marching orders from Kumasi to Elmina. Yet, about 500 anti-colonial Ashanti activists and courtiers decided to travel with him up to Elmina before his final voyage to the Indian Ocean. If the tragic hero and bearer of history was at last returning, the right courtesies were to be given. The voyage from Seychelles was 2 months long. from the harbor city of Bombay, or what is now modern-day Mumbai in India, through the port of Sudan, which is between Eastern and Central Africa, up north to Port Said in Egypt, still within the Red Sea, or the Eastern Arab world. It was from there that they sailed to Europe, first to Liverpool in England, and further across into the ancient port city of Marseille in southern France, and onwards to the British peninsula of Gibraltar on the south coast of Spain. They started the journey on the SS Olympia and finally made it to the Gold Coast on the SS Abyssine. Many of the welcome party or crowd slept at the Kumasi station on the eve of return till the expected arrival of the main train from Sekandi at 6 a.m. the following day, that is November 12th. Eventually, and one after the other, the 45 royal passengers, in a palpable state of anxiety, disembarked. The focus, as expected, was on Prempeh. Majority of the crowd had never met him, neither had they ever seen an image of him, which also explained why they were there in their numbers. They saw a middle-aged man in a distinguishing suit with an English hat, which went against their expectation of a cloth-wearing nobler. It was when some of the elders started screaming and singing his appellation that the jubilation started. A number of the young royals' returnees were carried on the necks of joyous others all the way to Asafo. Among them was the 10-year-old Mary Prempeh, daughter of the returning Asante. The jubilation, she told me in 1999, went on till the evening as mothers looked through the crowd for their children who had gone unaccompanied. It will be a cruel expectation that Prempeh's persona will remain the same, having left as a young king at the presumed age of 26 and spending over a quarter of a century in a strange land. He was culturally adaptable to multiracial Seychelles. He took to adult literacy, especially the English language, and the most English of recreations, cricket. He and some of the chiefs were into herbal medicine and trained some Seychelles, including their leading herbalist, Charles Diako, in their medicinal garden. An anthropologist in Mahé, J.P. Mahoon, and I are still searching for a manuscript, presumably written by Prempeh, his chief herbalist, the Domnasihene or Ankasihene, Kwame Boateng, and two chiefs of the Nsumankwa, Kwame Afre and Kojo Yeboah. The most important of Prempeh's new multifocal outlook was his interest in Western education and Christianity, which will be the most enduring on Asante society. A couple of weeks after he settled in at Asafo, he requested for a meeting with some immediate members of the ruling Oyoko clan. 41 of them attended. It was principally about their welfare and the additions made. Grandmothers and mothers went with the younger ones, and they were all introduced. Prempeh singled out two. The first was Edward Ousu, son of his sister Kuyabakma, and thus his nephew. Kuyabakma was the first royal to have unexpectedly died in Kumasi during the Exile. The other was the son of a Kuya Echan called Berima Kwekwe Dusei. Prempeh made it clear to some elders of Kumasi that the two would succeed him as Asantehene. This came to pass. Edward Ousu as Osajima Prempeh II or Osei Triche, and Berima Kwekwe Dusei as Opokuwari II. Edward Ousu had an interest in entrepreneurship instead of formal education, and his uncle supported him. As for Berima Kwekwe Dusei, days after the historic meeting, Prempeh personally took him to enroll at what is now the St. Cyprian Primary School at Fantini Town and left him in the care of the Anglican fathers. At some point, Edusei lived with them at the Church of England Mission House. Prempeh ensured the Christian growth of his successors, and it was clear that his interest was not an alibi for his early return from exile. The Harvard University historian Emmanuel Kokwe Champong once wrote that in need of spiritual explanation, Nana Prempeh was eager to learn about Christianity. Their conversion must have been powerful, for in converting, Prempeh was expressing allegiance to the Queen of England, as well as submitting to the religious oversight of the Archbishop of Canterbury. For many years, I found this as an extant truth. My conclusion later on was that it was more of his public policy decisions and the effect of his succession plan which eventually manifested, possibly in the Champong's conclusion. Many Ashantis were encouraged to go to Adisalda College, the Cape Coast, until Prempeh College was established. It was Prempeh's children and other returnees from the Seychelles who later led the independence from the Diocese of Accra in 1973. The future Opoku II, we must remember, was a servant of the sanctuary. He took over church leadership for over 3 decades as chancellors, registrars, wardens, and in a way created a synod structure linked to Menchia. The submission to the Archbishop of Canterbury in Kent became one to the King of Asante in Menchia. However, better relationship developed on bilateral frontiers. In 2023, the recently resigned Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, presented to Otumfuo Osei Tutu II the highest honor of the Anglican Communion, the Cross of St. Augustine, or the Lambert Award at Menchia. It was for his and predecessors' significant contribution to the growth of the Anglican Communion. The last monarch to receive this before him was the late Queen Elizabeth II in 2022. Earlier in 2015, Roland Williams, the 104th Archbishop of Canterbury, St. Augustine, and one of the world's leading theologians at Magdalen College, the University of Cambridge, will select Osei Tutu II to be guest speaker on history and archaeology at his college. This was at an event honoring Nelson Mandela. Christian values had a deep influence on their chosen successors. According to his biographer and collaborator, Alex Atayao-Chemartin, when Prempeh II was asked of the secret behind his success as a king for 39 years, the longest since the establishment of the kingdom, he mentioned his Bible, which he had kept from the day of his installment as Asante. The 83-year-old Bible is here at the Menchia Palace Museum. Chemartin wrote, "This is now reduced to a thread bell of a Bible, apparently through its constant use. His devotion and deep trust in God are sometimes frightening." When Prempeh I died, the 13-year Opoku II wept bitterly at the church service at St. Cyprian. He told his biographer, the British historian Ivor Wells, in the 1970s, that he lost a mentor and a carer, and he spoke emotionally, according to Wells, of those who had helped him but who have now departed this life. Aside Prempeh I, they included Father Carlton of London and his mother, Ekwia in Kumasi. Later, Opoku II will travel to England to pursue law instead of his choice of local government. As you may be aware, one of the district commissioners of Asante, in dispatches to London, wrote that litigation is beloved by Ashantis. Obviously, a royal lawyer would be more exotic in a courtroom situation. And so he went to England with the assistance of Prempeh II, the Kumasi Traditional Council, and the British Council. On his first Sunday in England, he served at the altar of the Church of St. Margaret's the Martha, now part of the lower end of the London Bridge, built in the second half of the 1600s. The respected newspaper, Church Times of London, which reported this, described him as a royal server and heir presumptive to the Ashanti kingdom. By these developments, Prempeh I had completely changed faith policy of the Ashanti monarchy after almost 200 years. His great predecessors, Ashanti's Osebonsu in the 1810s, followed by Kwekudi Apeni and Mensah Bonsu, had weathered off Christian influences. They argued that there was nothing wrong with the faith, since it was one God worshipped in different ways. The caveat, however, was that Asante traditions would not be subverted for the style of the other. This explains why, in 1869, the head of the Basel mission of the Presbyterian Church, Ramsiam, was imprisoned in Kumasi for 5 years. It was the same argument that the Buganda Kingdom of Uganda made around 1887. People could convert to Christianity, but not at the expense of traditional values. It was when the Catholic Church did exactly that, using the courtiers in the palace as tools of rebellion, that the Kabaka had all the convicts killed in the famous story of the Martyrs of Uganda. The questions worth asking, for which I do not have all the answers, are: why was Prempeh I in such a hurry with his succession plan? Did he know his days on the throne of his ancestors would not be long? Whatever they were, that plan, whether by premonition or strategic thinking, has been the most sustainable of peaceful successions in the last 100 years. Aside this was an economic management plan for the future. Until his death, only 7 years after his return, he did not have access to the wealth of his kingdom, as the prime lands and other ancestral resources, and natural resources as well, had been registered in the name of the British Crown. The two things he relied on were the pride of a people and a hopeful succession. In the end, they worked. Prempeh I was also the first to set up a modern administrative office of private secretaries, palace planners, state secretaries, and protocol units to complement the changing times. The earliest private secretaries had included the Seychelles-born Boatin brothers, in particular Henry and Paul, who developed compulsory education schemes for the royals and other talented individuals, branded the palace, and also opened the channels for international diplomacy and visitations from Africa and other leaders. These included the visit of the UK Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Stamford Cripps, to Kumasi. The reign of Ajimai Prempeh II saw fruits of these policies as he added on and created opportunities for greater growth. The leadership shown in the restoration of Asante Confederacy in 1935, as reflected in the papers, and the subsequent negotiation, which in 1941 led to the revestment of the lands in the Golden Stool in the Kumasi Lands Ordinance, will eventually produce some of the revenue that Ajimai Prempeh needed. These monies were invested in educational infrastructure, his association with 23 secondary schools, the eventual University of Science and Technology, and other policies which included the sponsorship of individuals to universities abroad. Many of the Asante Seychellois will later join the public service of Ghana, including public broadcasting, and who head the external French department at the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. They were also cricket commentators for the BBC, and one of them, as the Boatin brothers, Thomas, co-founded the Alliance Française in Ghana and was its president for many years, and another became an ambassador. Yet, others went to the judiciary and became justices, and a sizable number joined the bar. In fact, Ajimai Prempeh II recovered enough lost grounds, righting the usurpation of stool lands by non-royals, a situation the British had intentionally created as fodder for colonial control. By the time he was done with some of the major reinstatements, he had enough credibility such that the Chieftaincy Act 1961, Act 81, that was passed by the Nkrumah government and which created the National House of Chiefs, made him the titular president and for the headquarters to be in his capital, Kumasi. Prempeh II had also realized the changing times and has supported Shematin and others in setting up the Asante Cultural Center, which became the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa, in tangible and intangible preservation. It houses the Prempeh II Museum, whose facilities are still the most elaborate. Nkrumah nationalized it and asked Shematin to replicate it in the other regions of the country. There were the turbulent times of the dilemma of identity in an emergent Ghana from 1954 to 1957, when Asante sought a federal status. Cocoa and its producer price had been the immediate cause and had led to the formation of the National Liberation Movement, which was closely related to Menchia and Prempeh. It was the first, most violent political engagement after the last Anglo-Ashanti War of 1900. It was, however, not in unison, as it was based on partisan political interest. Prempeh II and Asante survived with long-term impact that led to the creation of one of the two major political parties in Ghana. The exile of Prempeh I created such a big dissolution from the 1900s and was of interest to many scholars, the British district commissioners and governors who wrote extensively about it. Virtually all the accounts never gave room for its recovery in a post-colonial situation. The chief commissioner of Asante, Francis Fuller, in a vanished dynasty, came to the conclusion that it was all over in its glory and imperial history. Even within, such pessimism was prevalent. The future Opoku II intimated that when he was growing up, the general feeling was that Prempeh I will never return. If there was any hope that he ever gave, it was in his correspondence to the elders of Kumasi. Thankfully, 9 years ago, Opemsuo II authorized this correspondence to be compiled in a collaborative exercise with the Seychelles National Archives, and they are now at this palace. The last of the documents got in 3 days ago. As Prempeh II was getting physically weaker towards the end of his reign, which eventually came and was announced on May 30th, 1970, Opoku II was at the peak or prime of his readiness by a prediction of fate. Prempeh II had groomed him and prevented him from going into banking. According to Wells, Prempeh II personally took him to the town and city council. This was after Opoku had gained some work experience in Takoradi and Axim in building surveys and land management. He became the Officer of Works and Development in Kumasi. The reign of Opoku II was peaceful and was the beginning of high-flight Asante diplomacy. He befriended other monarchs, which apart from the House of Windsor, included the King of Persia or the Shah of modern-day Iran, as a member of the Monarchies League. Of the uproar that greeted J.J. Rawlins's June 4th uprising in 1979 and the 31st December Revolution, he was tactful, and it later paid off as he became the elder of the nation. In a Silver Jubilee conversation that Charles Rekubrobe and I published in 1995, titled A Free Year, the wife of Opoku II emphasized this. He told us, when J.J. Rawlins staged his June 4th uprising, he came to Kumasi within that week. There was curfew, and at 1 a.m., soldiers came to our house here, that is in Seychelles, and said Rawlins was at the officers' mess and wanted to see Opemsuo urgently, and that I should take him to Menchia that early morning. I dressed up, and in the midst of a convoy of armored cars, I went with the soldiers with Rawlins in one of the armored cars to Menchia Palace. It was 1:30 a.m., that's in the morning, and we woke up the Asante Hima Nana Efiakobi and the other chiefs who sleep in the palace and went to see Opemsuo. Rawlins knelt before Opemsuo and introduced himself saying he had come to greet him before he would continue with his work. He had decided not to go to sleep that night without seeing him. On Rawlins' second coming on the 31st of December and the start of the revolution, Opoku-Ware was instrumental behind the scenes in getting some donor and multilateral support. At his funeral eulogy, Rawlins, on behalf of the state of Ghana, said, "I hope that one day the people of this country will know what Opoku-Ware did for us." For a declined empire, which had been written off and which Prempeh I had rejuvenated, its influence in national development over a century after exceeded a vanished dynasty. To understand the political leadership of Asante better, and especially from the return of Prempeh I, is to listen to what the nominees say on installment and not who did what. The oath of kinship, using the Opemsuo sword, is the social contract of a continuum, as were the reigns of Ajimai Prempeh II and Opoku-Ware II. So is that of whom we have now, Osei Tutu II. In April 1999, he evoked the names of his predecessors and promised to add to what they did, turning the Opemsuo sword towards the cardinal geographies of Kumasi, with the chiefs and people present as eyewitnesses. He swore that, "I am the grandson of Osei and Opoku. I am the grandson of Nana Bonsu. I am the great-grandnephew of Nana Ajimai Prempeh I. Nana Kwame Twitwi Prempeh II was my uncle. Opoku-Ware II was my elder brother. If my elder brother Opoku-Ware is gone to the village, and by the grace of Asante man, you have given his gun to me to rule. If I don't rule well, if I don't govern the state and protect you as my forefathers did, I violate the great oath." One of the challenges that Prempeh I had was to undo what the British had done with non-royals occupying certain stools. This was not of immediate concern, though, as some got resolved. He rather abolished certain stools whose relevance posed challenges to evolving modernity. One of them had a semblance in functionality of heir presumptive to the golden stool. As long as there was a reigning Asantehene, this should not be. If anything, it should only be an unofficial gossip. And that explains why he abolished the Mankwedua stool. As he was around for only 7 years, it fell on Ajimai Prempeh II to investigate the right lineage politics. Because he had time, he succeeded to a large extent. He also decided that for the first time, stool histories should be documented for prosperity. And so he charged Joseph Ajimai and Ivor Walls to do that in a 10-year project at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, which has helped to resolve some of the contemporary cases. If sustainability of the kinship was the forefathers' primary responsibility, Osei Tutu II was also in his oath the Lord Spiritual, whose duty was to protect the sovereign people as his forebears did. He has so far successfully adjudicated over 400 chieftaincy cases with their attendant disputes on the ownership and management of land before 1883. That is, after the Civil War, we've not had this peaceful period before. This has successfully been done, such that major tensions before the last quarter century that led to underdevelopment in communities are forgotten. I will give 3 more examples of secession that has made Asante stronger from the 1800s, and more particularly yet from Prempeh I. When T.E. Bowditch visited Asantehene Osei Bonsu in Kumasi, they discussed the British Museum. Osei Bonsu wanted to do something similar. The British Museum wanted to do something similar. The cost involved was, however, prohibitive, as the stones will have to be imported from Europe, as had been done in the building of the Forsten castles along the coast. He settled on building the Aban, which is a stone house and probably the first museum in tropical Africa. He told Badish that Asante would in the future build the type of the British Museum after he was gone. Something curious happened in March this year. Together with the curator from the British Museum, we had a view of this hall in which we are seated now and its compartment. We were surprised at its size and intended usage. Later, as we sat at the British Museum's Anthropology Center in London, going through Badish's papers, we realized that this hall has about the same size as the original one of the British Museum that Badish discussed with Opemsuo. The second example of continuum was about Prempeh II, who wanted to build a museum for Prempeh I in the late 1940s. As it could not be done, and Opoku knew of it, he turned the palace of Prempeh I into this museum at the other end, which will be 30 years next year. Now, Osei Tutu II, having given this auditorium, has almost completed the first purposefully built contemporary palace museum in this country. He sat through the partnership agreement in London with Tullow Oil Company and was involved with reviews of designs and secured the initial grant with which the museum was started and added on to it. 2 weeks ago, the Reserve Bank of South Africa gave permission for export of some Asante gold objects of the 19th century. This was through his initial contact with the Anglo Gold Ashanti, which had previously purchased these objects from a Swiss collector of African art. This will be part of his new museum and acquisition. The third example has to do with the looted objects of 1874 and 1897. Prempeh I, on his return, was livid upon learning that among the looted objects was a particular basin used for veneration at the Royal Mausoleum at Mantuma. His disputation with the British Colonial Secretary yielded nothing. While he and others thought the basin was at the British Museum, it has always been lodged at the National Army Museum in South Kensington in London. Prempeh II also requested for the restitution of the looted objects up to the late 1960s. Opoku II did the same. None of these objects, however, came. In the sense that the reign of Osei Tutu II brought 7 from the Fowler Museum in February and 32 from the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum in March, it's a classic condition of affirmation when they swear that they will add to what their predecessors did or could not do. The returned objects led to homecoming, adversity, and commemoration on May 1, 2024. This exhibition is the most visibly powerful statement and event since Prempeh's return. It had a global restitution interest of over 40 million people, with the BBC networks alone registering over 10 million. The ifs of history are detestable contemplations. But if Prempeh I had not returned, what would have happened? This memorial year constitutes a trinity of cultural renewal. 1874, 1924, 2024. Memorialized by his nephew, Ajimai Prempeh II, his grand-nephews, Opoku II, Osei Tutu II, who is presiding over this festival. It is under his reign that the government of Ghana, through his advocacy, named an international airport after Prempeh I. It is the making of history that Prempeh, before whose return was so desperate, has become a bicentenary patriarch of the Oyoko dynasty, or in our way, Oyoko PSA. On January 21st, 1918, he wrote that mournful petition. And I cite it here. Consider how wretched I am, for I am being taken prisoner together with father, mother, brother, and chiefs for now 22 years. And now, how miserable to see that father, mother, brother, and nearly 3/4 of the chiefs are dead. The remaining quarter, some are blind, some worn out with old age, and the rest being attacked of diverse diseases. And now I do not find where to glance and where to go to comfort myself. And my sole hope and comfort is by giving myself wholly to God, by whom all things are possible." Unquote. At this stage, he was a broken man. He had buried his mother, Nana Echa, who was also the Asante Hima, and within 26 days of that, his brother, Ajimai Bedu, with whom he did many things together. John the Apostle wrote, "We speak of what we know and bear witness to what we have seen." Ajimai Prempeh indeed had testimonies of foreboding. His tribute to the apostle was his Anglican priest son, John, who practiced on the island of Mauritius. Prempeh's many policy reforms, from especially 1926, included lifting the ban placed on him by the British of one man, one wife. He argued that he had a private life, and there was the Ashanti social expectation in that regard. A year before he died, he fulfilled his cardinal wish of bringing the remains of his 22 chief prisoners, whom he had buried in the Seychelles, to Kumasi. At the grand funeral he held for them, he told Kumasi and Asanteman of their loyalty and sacrifices to him, and asked all the families to reinter these remains, which has taken him 5 years to organize and to bring back. The other thing he did 3 months before he died was the rebuilding in a state of despair of the Sacred Royal Mausoleum at Bantama on March 30th, 1931. The British historian Thomas McCaskey paints the mausoleum as a spiritual grove and tells us that the Asanteni Kwekudia Penny, on the morning of April 27th, 1868, had a spiritual conclave there and came back in sorrow, dying in the night. On that fateful day of May 12, 1931, there was another spiritual conclave of a kind. Prempeh I had been very ill, but had decided to attend Mass at the St. Cyprian Church. As he could not get out of his car, he listened to the hymns being sung. Later, he called for the wardens and gave them his offering and went back to his palace. He died later in the day. Drawing down the curtains on this epic 19th century historical drama, of which he was the lead cast or dramatist personnel. We will never know what was on his mind that day, except to say that Cyprian, that volatile bishop of ancient Carthage, now modern day Tunisia, could have been his patron saint. Like him, Prempeh suffered many persecutions. The Anglican Church of St. Cyprian of Kumasi, the historian Emmanuel Champon has remarked, must have held a very special place in his heart to deserve such an agonizing physical and spiritual trip. We must not forget that it was at this same church that he had his official Thanksgiving service on his return from Exile in 1929. He took to the service the golden stool and his attendants for protecting him over the years. Prempeh's Christian faith could be for some the antithesis of the Pauline doctrine of one Lord, one faith, one baptism. But then, ancient beliefs and adaptations sometimes come together with historical and cultural antecedents. For instance, major parts of the coronation of King Charles III, as we saw it, were based on the Book of Kings in the Old Testament, including the tunic shirt fashion or dress of the Byzantine or Roman antiquity. The role of Zodok, the priest, anointing Solomon, had its equivalents to the Archbishop of Canterbury taking King Charles through the rituals. The English believe in the Stone of Destiny, which was brought from Scotland and taken to the Westminster Abbey for the coronation service, was not different from Prempeh's golden stool at his Thanksgiving service almost a century ago. Now, 106 years after all this, the last announcement an air traveler hears on final descent into Kumasi is welcome to Prempeh the First International Airport. At other times, the air hostess, with an assumption of your knowledge, says with a smile, welcome to Prempeh. Alas, he prevailed and made us empaths of figurative history. The British knew this 9 months before his death, and amazed at Prempeh's resilience to rebuild his kingdom, King George V conferred on him the King's Medal for African Chiefs. This hypocritical gesture could be, in the words of their universal playwright, a situation of all is well that ends well. Again, 100 years after his return, what is the Asante's palace has been walled of its 10-kilometer ancient forest. It will not be easy to destroy it as was done to Prempeh's. It is now comparable, if not in its monuments, at least in its attention to the Menelik or the imperial palace of Emperor Haile Selassie in Addis Ababa. We will conclude this address with the Indian Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul. In his well-known novel, A Bend in the River, are the opening lines. The world is what it is. Men who are nothing, who allow themselves to become nothing, have no place in it. Our secular prophet of old traditions was also our collective nemesis. It is because of that, and whom his charger is today, that our world is one of cultural renaissance. As you join in this renaissance, Your Excellency the President of Seychelles, you are also a participant witness of history, of faith, and adversity, an anthem of the Song of Moses. Over 40 years ago, you baptized 2 of Prempeh's great-grandchildren who are with us today at the same St. Paul's Cathedral in your capital of Victoria, where Prempeh worshipped. They have traveled with you to be here in communion of one exile, many stories. In the end, Opemsuo, and as you remember the past, so will the future remember you.
For no chiba, be easy to just go free my now. Money as something kaboom. Nanano, if you, or send Kukro, man phone, if you, If you want to buy it, if you find a Prempeh goes to say, Hanan, I will who some say, and I know if you, or send Kukro, we are man fool, if you, and Asante was sorry, some pray. If you, or send Kukro, we are man for if you,
Inti efie. Please, Ejakonimos and his Agrofuba band, a round of applause for them, providing the creative juices for us to appreciate and digest this well thought and insightful keynote by Mr. Ivo Ajimanduya, director at the Menchia Palace Museum. Please, a round of applause for him. What we want to do now, Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is to gain two insights. The first will be the events leading to the exile, and the second will be the king in exile. These two insights will last together no more than 20 minutes. Speakers, please take note. I shall now invite this first speaker on events leading to the exile, the first trained social historian of medicine from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi. Make welcome Professor Samuel Edujemfi.
His Royal Majesty, Otumfo Asante Hene, and also to the second, Her Royal Highness, Lady Julia, Nananum, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I stand on the existing protocol to proceed. A quick one, as we look at the presentation of Ivo, we are led to a very interesting narrative that tells who we have become as a people in this great Asante Kingdom. However, in 1896, the story was very different. In fact, from between 1894 to 1896, there was an attempted coup on Prempeh I, on the pretext that Asante had not kept the clauses concerning the indemnity that came from the Formina Treaty. But more so, there were other diplomatic overtures to ensure that there would be peace, because Asante did not only go to war, but Asante believed in diplomacy. And so whilst Asante kept to diplomatic overtures, in their minds they believed that the British will do same. In fact, when you look at what orchestrated the 1896 occurrence, we need to reflect on what had taken place in the 1880s. Because there was a grand European conference that is popularly known as the Berlin Conference. In that conference, 2 or 3 major important themes came up. The first one was effective occupation, and the second concerned the sphere of influence. British and other European engagements in Africa, for that matter, was that which aimed at exploiting the territory of Africa and to make good of her resources which nature had given to them. But it was not an equal relationship at all, because you see that in the case of the Gold Coast, the British had subtly and openly taken over the entire region, or the colony as it is referred to in the literature, except for the forest region of Asante. And so if the British would allow Asante to subsist as an independent kingdom, and for that matter an empire, it would, if you like, truncate its adventure. So several things were taking place at the time. There was competition between them. France, Germany, and other holdings and interests in Africa was ongoing. And for that matter, the British had to hold to their own, not only at the colony, but also to further advance to take over the entirety of Asante, to ensure that they govern same and benefit from its resources. Fundamentally, if you look at the 1800s, you would understand that Asante had had a lot of encounters with the British, taking off from 1824 when McCarthy dared Asante power and he was decapitated. And more so, you would see that such encounters, which Ivo has spoken to in many ways, ended up with the Yasantua War. But the fundamental ethos of it is that Asante had great leaders and great kings who were warriors and who did not believe in colonization. And for that matter, such resistance persisted from 18 1824 up to 1896 when Prempeh was taken to Sierra Leone and afterwards to Seychelles. But the question is that when you look at the 1880 conference and the event at Berlin, you would understand that a lot of things were happening. And today, Africa is still being insulted by the West. And I dare to establish a point with that, and maybe I shall yield because of time. You realize that when they showed interest in sharing the lands in Africa, Africa was not represented in that conference. I will refer to them as the G14, as you have today the G7. And these were the people: Germany, France, Great Britain, United States, Russia, among others. These were people who shared Africa on a piece of paper, but they had to effectively occupy Asante. The challenge at this time was that Asante had gone through many phases of difficulties and challenges. Kofi Kakari's challenge, and also the misrule which had occurred for a very long time. So look at Congo. King Leopold of Belgium wanted Congo. Belgium today has 11 million people. King Leopold of Belgium at the time wanted Congo, the heart of Africa's resources, and it was given to him on a silver platter. But that is what the African leaders, the African chiefs, who were democratically elected in their own enclaves, did not want that to happen. Exiling such leaders who were resisting colonization was a stock in their trade, and it is today a stock in their trade, because they intend to shove all political actors and developmental agents who want to develop their people. And we saw that in Patrice Emerson Lumumba's assassination. And we saw that in other great leaders in Africa who were taken away even in the 20th century. You are either exiled or you are killed. Before 1896, you would recall that King Agri of Cape Coast in 1867 had been sent to Sierra Leone. And he returned a sick man who denounced his own rulership and more so was put under stipend. It was an European agenda, a grand one which was undertaken. And that would go beyond diplomacy, because they wanted to absolutely take over the territory of Africa and more so take over the territories of the Gold Coast, including Asante. The invasion had immediate and long-lasting consequences. The exile of Prempeh I disrupted traditional Asante political structures and facilitated the implementation of direct British administration. As Kimball notes, this transformation fundamentally altered the political landscape of the Gold Coast region. The economic consequences were equally significant. British control led to the reorganization of trade patterns and resource exploitation to benefit colonial interests. In fact, in 1998, when Dammit was writing, he said the post-invasion period was to increase or saw British investment in gold mining, agricultural production, with profits primarily benefiting colonial interests rather than local communities. The Asante engaged in extensive trade networks that facilitated the exchange of valuable commodities such as gold, ivory, and later rubber. This trade underpinned their military expansion and allowed them to wield considerable influence in regional politics. And that was exactly what the British wanted to truncate, among other things. The empire's interactions with colonial powers, notably during the Anglo-Asante Wars, exemplified the tensions that arose from competing economic interests. These conflicts ultimately led to British control over Asante territories, yet the empire managed to retain its cultural identity and governance structures even under colonial rule. However, from the 1800s, Asante military and diplomatic encounters with the British were aimed at demonstrating their determination of resisting subjugation and assert their autonomy amidst the pressure of European imperialism in the Gold Coast. The 1896 British invasion of Asante and the exile of Prempeh I represented the convergence of economic imperialism, political ambition, and strategic colonial interests. The event exemplifies how European colonial powers used military force to achieve economic and political objectives, often under the guise of establishing protection or civilization with racial undertones. The consequences of this invasion continue to influence Ghana's political and economic landscape today. This exilic episode marked the depletion, or better still, the ending of a century of intense diplomatic activity between Asante and its neighbors, including African and European nations, which had helped to develop and standardize practices related to diplomatic appointments, representations, conduct, and strategies in Asante native diplomatic practice. More so, Nana Prempeh's failure to put up any military resistance has been said, or against the British in 1896, has led to notions of surrendering his nation. The 28-year-long duration of his exile has also raised questions that the Asante may have been quite content to live in exile. In addition, he has been accused rather posthumously of collaborating with the British upon his repatriation to allow colonialism in Asante. Such naysayers have overlooked the fact that Asante at the time believed in diplomacy and also believed that the British would conduct themselves in like manner. Certainly, King Prempeh could not mortgage the future of Asante that has seen many wars, including the sack of Kumasi in 1874 and the internal unrest which had lasted for several years. The new military technology or hardware of the British was well known at the time. Asante had to live to fight another day. As you can see, the Union is well and alive today with its many opportunities, challenges, planned progress, and fortuitousness. Thank you very much. I rest my case.
I cannot keep up. Professor Samuel Edujemfi, thank you for that very passionate presentation on the events leading to exile. Such fervor and militancy, hey, like a freedom fighter. But let me give you some water. And so our next presentation is on the King in Exile. That will be soft, because it will be done by a director of Creole Language and Culture Research Institute, the University of Seychelles. I give you Dr. Penda Chopper.
I wish to greet the King of Ashanti and the President, the First Ladies, and everybody. Can we have the slide, please, the projection? Okay, here we go. It is a great honor for me to be present here in Kumasi today on this most auspicious occasion at the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the return of King Prempeh I to the place of his birth and the seat of the golden stool over which he reigned as the Asante before and after his exile, as I shall set out to prove in this presentation. I wish to express my sincere gratitude to my friend and mentor, Jean-Claude Pascal Mahoun, who availed me of this opportunity and who pointed me to the right sources and guided my approach to the problematic of King Prempeh's sojourn in Seychelles. I also take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ivor Ajiman Dua, who has been so diligent in ensuring our presence in Kumasi for this occasion. I'm very honored to have traveled in the company of Seychelles' resident branch of the Prempeh royal family, the Prempeh Marimbas, hailing from my own district of Anse-Étoile. I would like to point out that I've restricted my presentation to King Prempeh's sojourn in Seychelles and the impact it has had on Seychelles' history and society, which is why I have called it lasting legacies. King Prempeh I arrived in Seychelles on 11th September in 1900. He was accompanied by 14 chiefs, 13 women, 13 children, 12 attendants, a total of 53 people. In 1901, the Queen Mother, Asante, joined the king in exile. With her came another 15 chiefs, 2 women, 4 attendants, and this made a total of 75 of the Asante people who were exiled to Seychelles. Without intending to, the king's captors had made it possible for him to maintain his status as a king among his own people by availing him of his council of chiefs, and in that respect, he made good use of that opportunity, on which I will proceed to elaborate later. Okay, so let's look a little bit at the background, what Seychelles was like in 1900 when the King Prempeh arrived. The archipelago was still governed by the British Colonial Office as a dependency of Mauritius. The population was approximately 19,000 inhabitants. Seychelles society at that time could be described as a typical colonial plantation society, which had been founded on slavery. A very small minority of French colonial descendants owned most of the land, while a majority of the population, consisting mainly of slave descendants, including the progenies of abusive relationships between plantation masters and African slave women, worked on coconut or vanilla plantations. I'm sure all of you know this story. The British presence was felt mainly in the administrative positions, but it was nevertheless a position of power. This was a time when slave trafficking in the Indian Ocean region was still fresh in people's memories, and indeed, some recent scattered islands might still have been, especially amongst Seychelles scattered island, illegal slave trafficking could still have been going on. There is some evidence in that direction. So in this environment, compounded by the presence of a fresh stock of African ethnic groups among the population who had been liberated by British anti-slavery activities in the Indian Ocean, King Prempeh's reception by the community could have been very different than what it turned out to be, had it not been for his personality. So I want to look now a little bit at the political conditions. When the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Joseph Chamberlain, inquired in July 1900 if arrangements could be made for the detention of the Asante and his retinue in Seychelles, the newly appointed administrator of Seychelles, Ernest Beacom-Sweetescott, accepted it as an integral part of his colonial responsibilities, in the same manner that his predecessors had accepted the responsibility of the Sultan of Perak's exile between 1877 and 1895. As for the treatment of the king and his retinue, once they got there, it seems that though in theory the Asante was stripped of his status, and indeed he was officially referred to as ex-King Prempeh I, he was in fact treated with every respect and dignity, and was accepted as the leader of the inmates of what was known as the Ashanti camp. Examples of this are Governor Sweetescott's invitation of the king, his mother, and all his chiefs to the celebration of King Edward VII's 60th birthday on 9th November 1901. And in 1903, he was there with his entourage to celebrate the unveiling of the Victoria Clock Tower in memory of Queen Victoria. So, as you can see, this is a stamp. This is a stamp in honor of King Prempeh, and that was in 1965. So that tells you that he was revered. People had respected him and had a good memory of him. Okay, so King Prempeh, once he had settled down, he was a very practical leader. He set to organizing the day-to-day running of the Ashanti's place of exile to ensure a sustainable and harmonious environment for the small group immediately in his care. And he noticed that the grounds of the place assigned to them was very fertile. So he set about establishing a farm to produce foods such as plantain, potatoes, maize, cassava, etc. And the wives were especially engaged in the rearing of pigs and hens, both for consumption and for sale in the community, which of course afforded an opportunity to mix with the local population and exchange with them. Most significant in this venture is the fact that King Prempeh attempted to earn a more stable income for his people by seeking to establish a vanilla plantation, which was a common cash crop in Seychelles at the time. So he didn't just sit back and rely on his allowance. He tried to become self-sufficient, or at least to become more self-sufficient and not too dependent. The colony experienced food shortage during the First World War, but in the Ashanti camp, their crops ensured that they did not lack nourishment. So I want to talk a bit about education now. One of the king's most notable accomplishments during his exile was that he attained an education in the culture of his oppressors and ensured that his children and the children of his entourage did too. So having started to read and write with his Fante interpreter, Timothy Corsa, King Prempeh was soon writing to the principal of Victoria School in Seychelles to assist him with books and copybooks to pursue his learning further. And did he write? We've just been told. According to Seychellois historian Tony Mathiot, King Prempeh was often seen at Carnegie Library in around 1910 or so, borrowing books. The king also arranged for a school to be built in the Ashanti camp for the smaller children and for the older children to go to school in Victoria. Records have been kept in the archives of the letters he sent to petition the government on the rising cost of school fees for his sons, and other letters, mainly petitioning to be repatriated. So King Prempeh I put the education acquired by himself and his sons to good use, the most amazing example of which is his compilation with his son Frederick of the work entitled The History of Ashanti Kings and the Whole Country Itself. So this is nothing short of visionary, and definitely the action of a king with foresight and progressiveness. His valorization of his country's culture is further illustrated by his desire to have someone teach him to read and write the Ashanti language. And the photo on the left is precisely that. Is the letter, a return letter where they refuse to allow him to have someone to teach him in his language, the language of the Ashanti. The king also saw the necessity of learning the Creole language in order to smooth relations between his entourage and the local people, to learn from them and to exchange with them. So, one of the most most intriguing legacies of King Prempeh's exile in Seychelles is the traditional Asante pharmaceutical knowledge shared with the local people. There are stories of the local people seeking medical advice and cues from the Ashanti camp, something which was facilitated by the women of the camp. Most interesting is the legacy of Seychelles' most renowned herbalist, whose fame is said to have spread throughout the Western Indian Ocean, Mr. Charles Zialor of Answayal district. He was said to have gained his knowledge from the Asante traditional doctors. There are even allegations of a book of Asante pharmaceutical knowledge having been in the possession of Zialor. Since it is already known that King Prempeh was intent on committing Asante traditions, history, and practices to paper, it wouldn't be impossible for such a book to have been compiled by members of his retinue. And certainly, it is a fact that two of his chosen followers in exile were traditional Ashanti court physicians, not witch doctors, physicians, namely Kwaku Afre and Kwame Yeboah. So, according to historian A. Adu Boahen, King Prempeh's eagerness to convert to the Christian religion was second only to his concern over education. King Prempeh must be playing with it. Now it's all over the place. Okay. Okay, I think we are back on track. Okay, so, I'd like, okay, let me finish about religion. Whilst the king did not outrightly impose Christianity on his followers, I'm not touching it, it's doing that on its own. While he did not outrightly impose Christianity on his followers, he did encourage them to convert, and they were soon receiving religious instructions from the Church Missionary Society, the continuity of which the king tried to insist on in spite of limited resources. So it was also a form of his education. On 29th May, the Queen Mother and King Prempeh and some of the other inmates were baptized in the Anglican Church of Victoria. And the king's vision in this respect was crowned, as we have just been told, by his son John's successful entry in the Anglican clergy after a period of study in Mauritius. It seems that this legacy was carried on in Ghana, where after the king's repatriation, most of his people also converted. Okay, so now, for the most important part of this presentation, lasting legacies. There can be no ties stronger than genetics between families and people, so we know that. And King Prempeh I has left behind such a legacy in both Ghana and Seychelles, a fact that is illustrated by the reunion of family members from both sides of the continent on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of his repatriation. The king's memory of the archipelago and his sojourn there, as well as the Seychellois people's memories of him, has resulted in the strengthening of diplomatic ties between Seychelles and Ghana, and most importantly, between the Seychellois and the Ashanti. This is symbolized by the presence of the President of Seychelles and his delegation at the invitation of the Ghanaian government and the present Asante Hini, Opemsuo Nana Osei Tutu II. The bonds between our two between our two countries are cemented not only by our historical ties and memories of friendship and respect between both parties, but also by the fact that members of King Prempeh's entourage, including his sons, married Seychellois women, thus linking the bloodlines of these two nations. So Ghana and Seychelles, we can never fight because we are family. Examples of these genetic bonds directly linked to King Prempeh I himself through his son, James Boaki Prempeh are the Prempeh Marimba family, through Mary Prempeh Marimba, daughter of Princess Susie Marie Prempeh. And as you can see, the family grows, which is a good sign for the Prempeh descendants in Seychelles. And Princess Igat Prempeh. These are only two examples. I know there are many more. James Boaki Prempeh's eldest daughter, Princess Igat, who had several children, one of whom, Molly Prempeh, made a visit to Seychelles in 2015, where she was given a warm welcome by her Seychellois relatives, as well as the general public, especially after she displayed the ability to speak Creole, even if she had left Seychelles as a young child. As she saw the name Princess Prempeh held by somebody at the jetty, Victoria, she called out, "La Mola!" which means, "Here I am," in Creole. So she never forgot. So there's Molly and members of her relatives in Seychelles. So in conclusion, a remarkable aspect of Seychelles' history is that its insularity made of it a perfect prison without bars for the British Empire's exile of kings, sultans, and other types of leader figures who stood in the way of their imperial designs. It must be said that among all the royal exiles who came to Seychelles, King Prempeh I left the most lasting impression and legacy. I would like to end by pointing out that though he was deposed by the British and was forced to refer to himself as the ex-king, he remained throughout his exile the Asante Hini. As is pointed out by Joseph K. Ajayi, in all his actions, he acted as a king. His deposition resulted from his decision to negotiate peace with the British colonial powers in a civilized and honorable manner, even to the extent that he refused to endanger his people by taking up arms when he was outnumbered in men and arms. Once deposed, he set about adapting to the situation mainly through education and conversion, all with the aim of building his people's resilience for a more long-term survival in a world where he readily recognized the fact that his proud nation of warriors no longer had the upper hand. Symbolic of the fact that the Ashanti never complied with the British deposition of the Asante Hini is Frederick Prempeh's reference to him as King of Ashanti in a letter to his father dated 1911 when he was still a detainee. The Asante Hini's royal welcome, both upon his disembarkation at the port and his arrival in Kumasi in 1924, are testimonies to the resilience and survival of the Ashanti's identity and culture. I thank you.
We're grateful to you, Dr. Penda Chopra, Director of Creole Language and Culture Research Institute, the University of Seychelles, for giving us that good appreciation of our king in exile. It now falls to the UNESCO representative to Ghana, Mr. Edmond Mukala Nguemu, to share his thoughts with us.
Opemsuo Osei Tutu to Asante, the Princess Hokot of Asante Man, Lady Julia Osei Tutu, President of the Republic of Seychelles, His Excellency Wavel Ramkalawan, First Lady of the Republic of Seychelles, His Excellency Linda Ramkalawan, the second President of the Fourth Republic of Ghana, His Excellency John Kufuor, Nana Mom, distinguished speakers, distinguished guests here present. It is quite very challenging to take the floor after these eminent experts who have spoken, and in particular, living this extraordinary historical moment that we are all witnessing today, and representing the United Nations institution here present. I'm really humbled, really, to take the floor and not to acknowledge that as I see the President of Seychelles here, we are actually celebrating also the hospitality, though in hardship, in hard times, of Seychelles in enabling us today. If we're enjoying what we are witnessing today, it is also thanks to that hospitality and the deliberate effort done by the Kingdom of the Republic of Seychelles. And which brings me really to the realization, as our last speaker really highlighted, that we are celebrating the Ashanti Kingdom has also extension places, and in particular, the Republic of Seychelles, which today I have learned a very powerful truth, which one has to be now careful that it is not just in Ghana, but when you go to Seychelles, you will also find Ghana. So the first element that I've learned through this intervention is really that extended and the hospitality, and also the element that we are celebrating, which is part of the African culture. So at this momentous day, marking the centenary return of Asante Opemsuo Prempeh I from exile in the Seychelles, UNESCO extends its heartfelt congratulations to the people of Asante and Ghana. This historic event is not only a significant milestone in the cultural heritage of the Asante Kingdom, but also a poignant reminder of its people's resilience and enduring spirit. As one of our experts clearly said, that the glory or the greatness of a kingdom reside in the duty to remember. And as we have witnessed and looked into the past interventions, looking into that very rich and painful memory, but also demonstrating the strength, the resilience, as well as the effort to look into the future, one cannot but just remember that the greatness of the Kingdom of Ashanti also resides in its effort in rebuilding, in revitalizing its culture. And I think that's all being done in the investment of His Majesty, Royal Majesty Asante Opemsuo Osei Tutu, for all the work that he has been accomplishing in the last 25 years. What we have witnessed, what we have celebrated, I had the privilege of traveling with him and also with His Excellency the President. We were part of the British Museum with all the British experts. While we were talking about the restitution of cultural relics and cultural objects that were taken abroad in many parts of the world. And you know that Africa is still struggling to restitute most of its relics. His Majesty brilliantly, in a very powerful but very futuristic vision approach, he highlighted, and I say future because even within the UN system we have been debating how to restitute, how to bring back. He puts on the table a solution where all civilizations, where African relics has been taken, will come into Kumasi and will celebrate the ingenuity, the creativeness, the priceless value of those cultural heritage. Because you and I, we know the reason why they are kept into the museum is because they are priceless. The reason why we want it back, because they are priceless. The reason why we need to transmit them to a future generation, because they are priceless. But having the brilliant idea of bringing the children of the world, both young and old, to sit on the same table and to celebrate the African ingenuity and creativeness, you know, that did not really cross anyone's mind but except His Majesty. And I want to really applaud that legacy. We are talking about a legacy of revitalization of cultural heritage, transmission to future generation. It is also in that very same line, as we saw very clearly when he visited the Seychelles. He said, we can mourn. We can mourn about the painful chapter of the past. And we know it very clearly that even out of the desert, in the scorching sun of the desert, even beautiful flowers also springs out. It is the same. Yes, it has been a very painful chapter, and we have the duty to remember. But at the same time also, we have the responsibility to build a future of peace and development. And that's exactly what he has said. He's looking forward into building, in bringing, and forging really different bridges. So those legacies that we just really see from his various interventions brought us with the Museum to work already on one proposal, which is to create a prize. An award prize for young creative artists who would convert both. He's stressing me. I try hard not to read the speech because it's so long, so I just tried really to summarize. So we're working, Your Majesty. We're going to work on the prize to enable young Ghanaian artists both in Ghana and also abroad in seeing how they are going to scale up, learn from their elders, how those jewelry, those cultural objects were crafted, the techniques. We want to make sure that it is transmitted to the younger generation. That's point number one. Point number two, we want to make sure that there is an award that is also given to these young ones, and that's one of the work that we are doing already with Ivor and all of his team, and we're hoping, God willing, that by May 2025, we will be able to come with some good news to ensure that that prize award will bear your name. But it's not just bearing your name, it's the legacy that your name carries that we want really to ensure that it is really highlighted. So without taking too much time, I just want to say that, all that we have listened is talking about the legacy of what His King Majesty really have done, both from the time that he has really taken his reign and how he's really driving the revitalization of the Asante Kingdom culture heritage, not only for the Ghanaian, but for the rest of the world. And I thank you.
One more time, a round of applause, Mr. Edmond Mukala Nguemo, the UNESCO representative to Ghana. Thank you for those warm thoughts. You are indeed a wonderful gift to this occasion. And now, Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, prepare for a breathtaking experience as I give to you the Center for National Culture, Kumasi, and the interpretation of our King, Nana Ajiman Prempeh the First.
Usibrekete sikwati makotia yeme Nasa yeme Untina yabo Inyo wapo yeme Inyo wapo yeme Usibrekete sikwati makotia yeme Nasa yeme Untina yabo Inyo wapo yeme Inyo wapo yeme Usibrekete sikwati makotia yeme Anagrodu yadom untina yabo Inyo wapo yeme Inyo wapo yeme Usibrekete sikwati makotia yeme Anasa yeme untina yabo Anasa yudi abromu besumana mpai Ayana poino Oni mokatachi besumana mpai Ayana poino Eko besie Jeruse wa Ewala mo Jame kwa Koda na poino Ayana poino Sayudi abromu besumana mpai Ayana poino Sayudi abromu besumana mpai Ayana poino Eko besie Jeruse wa Ewala mo Jame kwa Koda na poino Ayana poino Na ewa befie Class 1, Kodu University. Now 3-1-2. The share ya say. And I do Munkanea. I do Munkanea. Also can the mission do. I the share ya. I the share yo. I the share ya. I the share ya.
Behold, the tale of Nana Ajiman Prempeh I, the 13th king of the Asante Empire. A reign marked by a riveting saga of turmoil, conflict, heart-wrenching tragedy, and heroism. This fearless leader, who ruled from the 26th of March 1888 until his death in 1931, faced countless challenges from the onset. Prempeh's ascension to the throne was marked by a brutal civil war, which left deep scars and divided loyalties among the Asantes. The states of Mampong, Kukufu, Insuta, Adansi, and Dadiase refused to recognize his authority, while Kumasi, Bekwai, Jabing, Ejuso, Opemsuo, and Nkoranza stood by him. And yet, as he navigated these treacherous landscapes, Prempeh faced an even greater threat: the British Empire's relentless pursuit of control over the Asante Kingdom. With his unwavering dedication to preserving Asante sovereignty, Nana Ajiman Prempeh resisted British deals and sweetheart proposals, sparking a maelstrom of conflict and intrigue. With a heart full of peace, he defended his people against the British. And yet the British, determined to destroy Asante sovereignty, sowed discord among the people. turning brother against brother and chief against chief. And yet, Nana Agyemang Prempeh remained resolute, willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of his kingdom. The British exiled him to the Seychelles in 1896 for his defiance. But even in the darkest depths of despair, Prempeh's legacy endured, inspiring generations to come. Join me on this captivating journey into the heart of Asante history as we unravel the complex tale of Nana Agyemang Prempeh I, a monarch who embodied the very essence of courage, wisdom, diplomacy, and sacrifice.
Hey, another means say, Jetsi Yatua. Ene. Umbenumanum bio. Jetsi Yatua.
Any evenumansa. Any evenumansa. Any evenumansa. Doku ano no baby o ba doku na ya zitu pa kwa chire na na se doku ashe mi na
ene we ya na pia
doku azu ya wo che ho dodo ade ya nsa no anti ne ba hu ya se ko ashe no na kusi ensa de wunya si etwa na nopa edon me yakwati aba ni de edeye
roshani no eli ni si ya kama pa he anade doku asase
mbie pa unsa de ko ye pa
no na de tenda o tenda
mani pian
Come, esa ko you.
Esa ne de come. See the bia me catch up.
Ena
ku esa de.
Just the ato.
Unim nyansa ngambo fo bi. Unim nyansa nka udi konkonsa. Oh yeah. Unim nyasa. Anga umfom sikagada. Nukrotodo. Unim nyasa. Umu Asante se mu hia o.
Egusi. Na budi na asa kasetia.
Meba. Minya sorry. Eya susu chabi.
Na bedi ye.
Yebesia.
Agande si na budi na asa kasetia.
Na wa wudi mu no. Kasetia sese. Tumasi opanyina senso ba no.
Na se wono ko papa elim sa no.
Na se o papa ni mu se no cheso no ni mu sa no.
Duku ashembia.
Kwamtia. Mama mi sa wo. Se wo kura waja ka otum fo ntara fo no.
Fa ho ben.
Na afi ade nti na de bia wo sori a na wo tu akuti anyum tie Asante hima na ya chansa.
Obeto o kire sei.
Na sa Asante ma ya kwesi kokko den.
Na disi Asante to pimpa mi unhu ya na.
Asante to pimpa ma. Akwesi kokko ne da no.
Kusi. Asante ya wodia. Ya da ma Asante ka fa na.
Aminka asem bi nchiro. Me de milim pefe sen ka wunya ya. Enka ya atwebo na ene nke die so Asante hine. Na so amane sa. Sisi ya na Prempeh na die so Asante hine. Eti osi nyina ya baako. Ema Asante man ka bom ne nkoso. So ati ase. Hwe. Efri otumfo osetu nya me kase odi kan penso. Ene ne yonko obere konfo. Ena Asante nyina ka bom ya befua. Na osusum heskedwase. Na siya kwesiko betira mpoanu. Wa for Prempeh to sem ko benya Asante. Na so enye ye da.
Kusi. Duku ajonsa. Me ko ebreko.
Come here.
Say ya. 120. What can someone kasi onu nsa wunchia. Famsi kamame. Famsi kamame.
Na wano din su niska. De pia banu musa wuntia. Edoku a nyabotre. Oso baba betua. Nyabotre man. Obetua.
Kusi menkao. Etia na me adumo na Prempeh na hemfu betu pasa wa hemfie. Enti me siro ma rofi.
Mimi ni pa. Na question. Come here. Twemi. Manu so na.
Swami.
Abranti we de medi na chi a. Na mi nkoja. Come here. Come. Hey.
Musa wunchia. Ensamwa kesia na wanoka. Ensamwa ni kwa ensa woka. Ena woka. Koso wono musa wunchia. Boame.
Yo.
Achiame. Tiemento nanano mam sem cinema won makwaba.
Nanano said Opemsuo sie no oso makwaba.
Ejene so o se me da won ma sesa brebia me to safre won ma do sie yo.
Nanano yewra se wodamase. Sa brebia wo to ne safre mu a mo do sie yo.
Mo se me frɛ won ma na ye krata foforo me saka from rado won ti na me se won mra me
Opemsuo so frɛ mu a na ye krata foforo a ne saka free amrado nkyɛn enti no frɛ mu.
Nanano mo nsɛm dada na amrado babie mu.
Yewra se asɛm dada na ɛna amrado sadia babie.
De de kan nsɛm makwa mankofo medida wa Asante memu ha.
Opemsuo se de din kan amrado sei o makwan na nkrofo medida e wona
Afe me makwan ma bronia na me sini metina Kumasi.
Afe so yewura nsa makwan ma amrado ne nam sini ensa metina Kumasi.
Afe me adi Prempeh me nya nipakum.
Afe so Opemsuo enya nipakum.
Na nanom asem foforo amrado Asante abeka ho nsese metie nam di so dia ne abusumi bia no obetua ne nananom bia.
Afe Opemsuo say di amrado Sade atachire ni say se wotie ne nsem a wode aba no na odi so dia ene obetua na Prempeh obetua ne ka watia mo nananom so mo ka.
Na se mentie no manfo se anyo yon so de ene obaba betuma de so na odi atrebu na tenadua so so.
Yewura say amrado say yewura ntie ne nsem do de ba no na se wani so dia ene obaba betu na Prempeh de so na wode atrebu na abesi adwa so.
Nananom me frem na we ne nsem foforo amrado Sade aba.
Nananom yewura so frem a na we ne nsem foforo amrado Sade aba. Nananom madama said your Opemsuo ose no. Madama nananom mo sempa. Sempa.
Tu vocha me.
Kasa
Gabi itina ho. Ena sama akosikoko akofa aba no. Eya bufu sempa. Onim nyansa. Nyansa no wan hia bi. Ansa ne de ne betres kampo anu won mo ana. Nananom ye wo hoi. What the hell? Dabi. What the black woman? Dabi. Anas what to say intimi hwe ho. Abasa. Sese mu dabaya. Abo bia ewura mu bi. Mini pi kan.
What channel? Wadaru. Ajesu Kofi afa ni gina ho. Na afra ne kasa. Mo se ensem na wokraten. Amrado na troye. Ensem hiye. Na opeso kire say. Anya bia oni si ahini maye. Dabi. Wana boya ko huma. Dabi. Mira wadama. Ye ntwe koma ne say. Ye meprem ne kom. Ma boya ko huma.
Tare
Afenso ahimfie pesi esi no. Anya bia edi nipa moja na be fred ote no. E de abotoa. Ye nsi akwasi boni wa ha. Dabi. Ye mpe no ye mamuomu wa ha. Dabi. Asante ye tuwo ye ti asundwem. Onfa na fofora onfa ma ha. Onfa baby. No. Ofesu kojoko mi gina ho. Ebanyi si sabo na se wadaje a. Uso se ne bo. David. Agwasko koyo dadafo. So nya ye hawa. Esu mo na sumu nyu no da. Se li se hunti se mo pini soma mi a. Wetia oni wa hin fu mu bia aka. Ya je na agwasko kwato na otia ye nka busumi bia. Se blem. Ana ye nsase no pese ade ma no. Na dia ba jijite. David. Hwe. Ejapadi a ye nanum du won moja apre agu wa maye no. Anya di kwaji dite. Dabi ensi da biara ta.
Nana tu vocha me oda wo ma bi gina ho.
Kasa.
Asemi medi kan kan dada. Empapa mu no aba no. Ama mampon. Kokofu. Dadi ase. Ni adanse akoti atwenepo adanchi no. Na ama na basa. Enua. Kasa sisem wadi. Ni tibida. Many say if I broach a buy, Nana, woman, you pack. Mo unko abrochire. Unko hune mayen. Nesu wapa, and why you or the baby yard. Near Susu, some way and why. Aman. Say,
Minoyaki.
Sure. Mahunu said, just the home pray no papa. Mumusan, mam send some ben was to say, Conco bisa broachire him.
Now just in Wadama. Said an Prempeh was soon to say in some way you could be able to him. Two for chairman, Wadaruma, your qua, you must say, when the mom not to trek crata and play. I feel you want to say, or Baton Yadwa, not what to do. Debbie. You're right, Wadama said ye, Nananum Essien.
Say, I'm rado above one corner, so him, Castle on the Kaiser. One knows to say, I have above one from my
Nana Wadama said ye Russian. Ura, Wadama, yan can't you go him and say, Asante memu haje. Obey him any or him money ye. See the medical can. Obaton Yadwa, not to do. Na Prempeh Wadama said ye Nana Usiano.
Achame. Tiemantuna nano mam say, Nini. What they are Kadanya and to Peso Babe Asianso ab say. Nananum said ye, na Prempeh no, or see a fin so, Nipo Peso Bedigo.
Yama Imua, and also they done an account, and also Sandy and Cancheno.
For Chami, Madaruma, and the catcher and say, the Virgin home, Nimuno, a pia, no, Fedi Pepia, Yanin Yajin, Croc, Emetaha, Kofa Grub, Nibia, Betana, Beteti, and Grantimusia, Eti, Yamasi, Yokofei, Okophobia Bar, not Trini Adrian Emeko, and the Bassan Swap, what the Nibra, ever play so. Yempadisa, ye concert Yamasi. Yempo Bia. What do you call Krobutiba? A bassa, now, Prempeh Wadama said, and anonymous.
Achame. Tiemento nanum mam semi da one mass papa.
Nananum, now Prempeh Wadama papa.
Said ye nananuma cano, Amrad donin and penny for 1 million one cassa ye, dear.
Said that Prempeh no Samrado, Nenedom, Omojo one cassa ye.
Nayan so yan trust my salmon fire say.
Eurasian Trasse, and my answer, and salmon fire say,
dear baby, and Cancosicoco.
See a tear baby and Cancosicoco.
Yanko Nicrum,
Yentian Mrebia, Yentian Mrebia,
so person treat any moment to change no person better Asante.
Nanso, a Pescoco person treat any moment, change or person better Asante.
Achame, Tiamanton and Anumam, some mechanic pain, numbers in pain, said, Mene to my young Chacoscoco, the Biada.
That's it, you're right. Nananum, Sadia na Prempeh, Ajima Pamo, what's the no, or sister or Tiasia idiot, or Nina Santamai, or Monquan Quashaquasi Coco, and Rassi the Biada.
And that's who Yemi who.
You're Rassi who did who?
Achame missing who.
You're Rassi who did who?
Miss Ronnie Pan Sans Ratio.
You're Rassi was 20 pounds since Ratio. Your run Rossi Bond was running one.
Srobe and Masroboja.
Your Rassi was Roboja and was
one of a photo mark was Sumpan Koto couldn't to repentance.
Your Rassi one Sawa Yano and for photo. I'm your Sumpan Koto Kodu and to repentance.
Maintenance in Yamuko Marcos Coco and Camino.
Your Rassi one Trassen and Ukoko and Marcos Coco Metan.
Nananum will be an Yapama Semi Adma Prempeh was. Nanso nananum nie me pa ani asomdwe
nanso yewura se no pa ani asomdwe
media asomdwe nko na me hwa ma asantema se de be ya asantema betumpon
yewura se one de asomdwe nko na opa ma asantema se ne be ya asantema betumpon
me pa asomdwe ntimra me nananum di misi abanwa so so asantehene no metonsa fra amrado se omra bi
yewura pa asomdwe nti ebra ya nananum di misi adaso no oto ne nsa fra amrado so no so onfa na ni krotua wisi emehwe bi
acheme said ye nyina ya kanu ye betu abofo amanako abroche no akobisa asante hima ma se aso no na ma amrado kwaso nkruche sanka temre ya ye huni amanim yaye
nanadom said ya na Prempeh no osi ye betu abofo amo akwa abroche hima ho no akobisa no so no na ma amrado kwan so nkruche sanka tayi mfamre ya akire ye ho no yeso ya tunufo
so kase you no ayamabofo na tunufo no akirekire na asante amamre eni amane
yewura se so jitu se yo no na mamra do kwan a yamabofo na tunufo no akirekire no asante amamre eni amane tie
me kate wone
krache kosa
me se me krache wo hene
krache kosa yewura wadama
achia me muntie wo ba mo bodin yi nkire no mame Mose on true a dry friend said John answer Albert answer
Joe
Ame Boateng
Joe
Kwaku Foko
Joe
Kwaku Nkunuma
Joe
Kwabena Bona
Joe